Hi everyone, this is Sam Black, and I don't typically do set reviews, but I did put a sub goal on my stream for a set review for Midnight Hunt and achieved that goal. So I'm going to take my attempt at doing set reviews my way, which I think is a little bit different from most set reviews you may be used to. Typically, set reviews are performed before a new set is out, therefore before any data is available. This is a few days after Midnight Hunt's release, so we have some data on 17 lands, so I'm going to use it. I'm going to talk through all the cards, and 17 lands is going to give me assorted numbers, and I'll, as part of talking about these cards, reference those numbers and explain those numbers. I'm not going to just say, oh, this card has the best X, therefore it's the best card, but I think that the numbers provide a good framework and benchmark for a conversation. So also this means rather than reading the cards in alphabetical order or whatever, I'm going to be reading them by what I consider the most generally useful stat, game and hand win rate on 17 lands. So I'm going to start with the white commons, which I have pulled up here. They are currently sorted by game and hand win rate. And I'm just going to go down the cards here and give you some thoughts on them. So, Lunar Veteran. I'm not going to read the text of these because I'm just going to hope that you can see them. So, Lunar Veteran has the highest game and hand win rate of any white common, despite the fact that it is a 1-mana 1/1, which is a little bit on the low impact side traditionally. The fact that it has the highest game and hand win rate does not tell the whole story here. I do not believe that this is actually the best white common. You have to take into account the fact that the game played number and the game and hand number, which should basically directly correlate, are lower than the cards around them. So like Search Party Captain and Gavin Trapper, which have a lower game and hand win rate, have a much higher played rate. Well, Gavin Trapper, not as much higher. But the Silversmith, for example, much higher. The reason for that, I believe, is that Lunar Veteran is like a synergy card rather than a raw power card. So this is something that you should think about similarly to Price of Loyalty in the previous set, where it's really good if your deck supports it, but you don't want to put it in just like anything. So you need cards that want to use this to make them better. It's a support piece. And the cards that it's best at supporting are Shipwreck Sifters and Ecstatic Awakener. If you don't have like multiple copies of those cards, I think it's pretty rare that you should play Lunar Veteran in your deck. If you do have multiple copies of those cards, I think both Lunar Veteran is good and your deck will be good, because I think those cards are very, very good when paired with Lunar Veteran. So I'm not really a big believer in assigning letter grades to cards or anything, but Lunar Veteran is a card that when you're the right deck for it, you should prioritize it very highly, but early in a draft, you shouldn't prioritize it above the other best white cards. Search Party Captain. This has a little bit more general utility. It has felt not disastrous to just have to spend 4 mana for this, and every mana less that you spend is a pretty big deal, especially if it means that you can cast this on turn 3. And I think this card is generally doing precisely what you want to be doing in this format, which is to say that it is a value creature rather than a creature with big numbers. I think that this format is defined by its powerful and efficient removal in a way that is very punishing to spending a lot of mana for a large creature that doesn't give you anything if it's killed. And so instead of playing cards like that, you want to play cards that are good against removal because they give you something outside of the body that they provide themselves. So search party captain, outside of just how good it would be in a general context, is particularly lined up well in this format. It's doing what you want to be doing. It also gives you a body to sacrifice if you care about that kind of thing. It provides an extra creature for Coven while giving you more resources so that you can just have critical mass creatures to keep up your Coven. Generally, a good card in basically any white deck. This is likely the best white common overall. Gavin Trapper. I am genuinely surprised that this card is this high up in game and hand win rate, because expensive creatures are generally not good. Your opponent is more likely to have more small creatures rather than one big creature. And it's hard to get 2 mana worth of value out of tapping a small creature rather than tapping a large creature. Also, this card is really bad in multiples, where it doesn't do anything if you're not putting mana into it, and if you have multiple of them, they're demanding more of your mana, likely more than you want to spend on this effect. That said, where it's good is it functions as a removal spell and a creature toward giving you Coven. So if you're just trying to establish your Coven numbers, it's sort of like a 2-for-1 there, not like a full 2-for-1, but it's, you know, both like adding and subtracting to the board. Like it's making it harder for your opponent to participate in combat while easier for you to have your critical mass. Also, if you're an aggressive deck, it can function even more as 2-for-1 at denying an opponent who's trying to block by doing like end of your turn, tap your guy, untap, tap your other guy, hit you. So I think Trapper is like a card that you want one of in particularly your Coven decks, but maybe in other decks. But you really want to be very careful about not having too many of them. Multiple Trappers don't work well together. Therefore, like with Lunar Veteran, you want to take it later relative to its win rate because you want to avoid having too many of them. So similar outcome where you don't want to like first pick this card, but substantially different practice where when your deck is about Lunar Veteran, you might want a lot of them, whereas when your deck is about Gavin Trapper, you don't want a lot of them. You just want to make sure you have one or something. Next up, Blessed Defiance. This may come as a bit of a shocker. This kind of combat trick is typically not very highly rated. I would say that almost every set has a 1-mana white combat trick like this that is goes extremely late. This is an average taken at 10.9 and is played very little. This is played way less than the cards around it, but has a really high win rate. And partially, I think that is literally just the world slightly underrates how impactful these like swingy 1-mana tricks are anytime like tempo matters at all. But also there are certainly some decks that don't want tricks, and you can only make room for so many like things that aren't creatures and stuff, and the more stuff you have that specifically targets creatures you control, the harder it is to have more of it. This card, like the lifelink, is actually a pretty big deal in this format because blocking is really hard in this format, and life totals start low in this format because of the nature of the zombies, and also the power of removal, where if you like play a big creature and try to hold off your opponent's creatures with it, they can use a removal spell to clear your blocker and hit you. So because blocking isn't good and life totals are low, racing is that much more likely. And so this card that gives you 2 power and lifelink is very capable of swinging a race. And then also the fact that this lets your creature trade up but doesn't save your creature would typically be a problem. But in this format, you might be using it on a creature with Disturbed, where you maybe actively want it to trade, or you're not particularly sad that it trades, because you can then cast the back half. and then you're also up the 1/1 flyer here. So you trade the front half of your disturbed creature for their larger creature, and you gain life, and you get an extra body, and then you can play the back half for another body. And now it doesn't even feel like you're, anywhere near down a card for this trick, and you've like generated enough tempo to make up for the fact that you have to spend mana to return to like do the disturbed part of your creature. So I think that this card is probably at its best in blue-white, where you can use it with disturbed creatures. But might have applications in other places. This kind of card is generally underrated, but also don't go crazy with them and try to fill your deck with them. It will likely not go well for you. It is still pretty situational. Gavin Silversmith. This card comes from a long line of cards that play really, really well, and I think people have like learned that and expected it to be very good. I think that in practice, this thing's win rate is relatively indistinguishable from even Search Party Captain. We're looking at 59 and change either way, 59.9 versus 59.1. It's good for many of the same reasons as Search Party Captain, where it's a body that's providing you immediate value that you get to hold on to, even if they answer this body. I think that the aggressive nature of the format would lead to a belief that perhaps getting counters on the board is better than getting a card in your hand. But this doesn't have the possibility of reducing its cost, and the card in hand might play better against removal and stuff. Like you don't necessarily want to load counters onto something that then becomes a juicy removal target. I think that this card is very, very, very close in power level to Search Party Captain. Very strong. Definitely something that you want to prioritize in white decks in general, and especially in aggressive white decks. Clarion Cathars, another really strong 4-drop. This is a problem that white has, where its like 3 best creatures are basically all 4-drops, which means that each of them should be a lower priority when you're drafting, such that it's not crazy to take like a Candlegrove Witch. I don't think I would want to take a Qatar Commando, but certainly a Candlegrove Witch over one of these 4-mana creatures that in general is better, just because you have to pay a lot of attention to not getting glutted at 4, and you do want to have a good curve in this format. So Clarion Cathars, often likely the weakest 4, but notably very good in both white-green and white-black, where for white-green, the token matters because it's giving you Coven, and in white-black, the token matters because it's giving you an object to sacrifice. There's nothing bad about this card. It just suffers from a glut of white common 4-drops. Candlegrove Witch, I think this is a really good 2-mana white card, and then again, just because there's such a glut at 4, I think that this should be drafted more highly than its win rate, because it is like it's the best 2-drop, and you want your deck to have a lot of 2-drops. Also, there aren't that many creatures in this format that are good at blocking flyers, so the evasion on this is pretty strong. Not really much else to say about this. Obviously, it's better the more likely you are to have Coven, but in general, it's just a solid 2-drop in a format that wants you to have good 2-drops. Qatar Commando, next best 2-drop, slightly weaker than Candlegrove Witch in most or possibly all cases. Could be better if you're sufficiently low on Coven stuff. The Destroy an Artifact or Enchantment utility definitely comes up, but not super frequently. Flash also comes up, not super frequently. Flash is at its best when playing with werewolves, I suppose, so that you can pass on your turn to flip your werewolf and then play it. This doesn't have the utility that a flash card would have had in previous Innistrad. It's stopping your opponent's werewolves from flipping, because werewolves now don't care if your opponent casts something on your turn. Morning Patrol, solid but not amazing body, but the best 3-mana play, assuming you're not reliably turning on Search Party Captain. I think that most white decks want it just because of a dearth of quality 3-drops, and then it's just a fine rate by itself, and then it's occupying essentially a unique spot in the curve, unless you get uncommons. If you have strong uncommon 3-drops, or your second color is providing 3-drops, you don't need to worry about white's shortage of 3-drops, but it's something to watch for, where it's often going to be the case that you're looking for exactly this as the common that you're planning to spend 3 mana for. Soul Guide Gryph is interestingly positioned. In general, I think expensive creatures that don't provide much value up front are pretty bad in this format, and I would describe this as not providing sufficient value up front for 5 mana. It does kind of rule the skies at common, which is nice, and its numbers line up well in that it can't be killed by Moonrager's Slash or Defenestrate or Olivia's Midnight Ambush if you can keep away from Night. So it has an advantage over, it also dodges Silverbolt. So it has an advantage over other expensive creatures that don't offer you value up front or very much value up front, based on being kind of uniquely good at avoiding removal. But I still find that most of my decks, there are other 5-mana plays I would prefer. I don't consider it a failure if I end up playing one of these, though. Flair of Faith is just a powerful combat trick if you're playing humans. Good, especially in aggressive humans decks, or if you have particularly valuable humans. Pretty bad if you're likely to want to use a pump spell on non-humans. You want a really high density of humans to play this. Don't think there's much more to say about it. Don't think you need to take it highly. Obviously, it's taken like 9.8 on average. It doesn't have an exceptional win rate. Has applications, but not highly valuable. Now we're getting into like narrow and or bad stuff. So you can see everything below Sun Gold Barrage has a negative improvement when drawn. Sun Gold Barrage, I'm honestly surprised that it has the positive improvement when drawn. Kill a big creature should not line up well in this format because most people should not be looking to play high power creatures because they are, this is toughness 4 or more. Sorry, I was thinking this was like most white removal and triggered off power. The fact that this triggers off toughness helps because it means that it kills Soul Guide Gryph and Diregraph Horde. So it has a few more targets than I was thinking. It also kills Bird Admirer. I still think that this is a little on the narrow side because generally expensive creatures are so preyed upon by Black's removal. But it's probably not disastrous to play one of these or whatever. I haven't done that myself yet. Candle Trap. In general, I hate things that try to be removal spells and are auras. It's certainly much less bad if you can spend mana to actually exile a creature, which this lets you do, although at that point it stops being cheap removal and becomes expensive, somewhat conditional removal. It also doesn't play well if you're trying to attack on the ground because they can still block with their creature. I think that there are decks that use this well, that are like good at making Coven and have flyers where it's acceptable to play this, but never a priority. If you are still of the mindset that anything that is removal is a card you should take highly, and you're applying that to things that are enchant creatures, should really reevaluate. In general, sorcery speed removal, which most enchant creatures that serve as answers are weaker than instant speed removal, and this is a format where all removal is categorically worse because the best removal is so strong. Because the best removal is so strong, that it pushes people to prioritize the value cards over the large cards. And so cards that are good against the large cards and bad against value cards end up mismatched against the cards that people are actually putting in their deck. So Candle Trap would be pretty good if people were playing a lot of like big red and green werewolves and stuff, but that's not what they're doing, so you shouldn't play Candle Trap. This is especially true if you're playing at Mythic on Arena, because at Mythic on Arena, you're playing against the like most skilled drafters, drafting at pods of often more unskilled drafters. And so the weakest decks end up playing at lower ranks, while the best decks end up playing each other at high ranks, which means the Mythic drafters end up just playing a bunch of mirrors of the top performing decks. And therefore, if you're like playing at Mythic rank, you're even less likely to play against the kinds of cards that Candle Trap is good against. Unruly Mob starts small, gets big in some decks, mostly bad, but has some applications in certain white-black decks that are very long on making creatures die, especially with lots of zombie tokens. Homestead Courage, mostly bad, some potential application to very aggressive white decks, especially aggressive white decks that have a high creature density and are looking for Coven, especially if you happen to have a lot of creatures that have the same power. This can let you differentiate to trigger Coven. For the most part, I think you want to avoid playing it. Celestis Sanctifier, basically just a creature with bad rate. I would never want to put this in my deck. Ritual Guardian, I'm surprised that this thing's stats are worse than Celestis Sanctifier, but, you know, it's well within margin of error. I don't ever really want to play this, but I think it's like somewhat not embarrassing if you're playing a Coven deck, because racing could come up. Hedgewitch Mask, again, hard for me to imagine a situation where I'd want to play it. Thrabin Exorcism, sideboard card in a format where I'm not really sideboarding. Those are the white commons. Let's go to white uncommons. Ambitious Farmhand. This card is absolutely awesome. It is a cheap creature that gives you value, so it lines up well in the format in that you're looking both for cheap creatures and value creatures. It costs double white to turn it into a 3/3, but it brings you from 1 white to 2 white by finding a second plains. It requires Coven, but it makes it very easy to get Coven because it gives you a 1 power creature and additional objects. And then it flips into a 3/3 lifelink, which is really powerful. This is, I believe, currently the uncommon with the highest game in hand win rate, and it is well deserved and absolutely fantastic in any white deck. I can say confidently, despite the fact that I've never been lucky enough to see this in a draft and be able to put it in my deck. Gavin Dawnguard, also awesome. 3/3 for 3 with Ward is just good stats up front. A lot of the like blue and red creatures that give you value when it switches from day to night have been underperformers, notably like the blue 4-mana 3/2 that draws a card when you flip between day and night. It's really, really slow. Gavin Dawnguard looks kind of similar in that both of them just want to hang out and draw cards for flipping back and forth. But there's a huge difference between being a 3-mana 3/3 ward and a 4-mana 2/3. One of them is above rate and the other's below rate. And when you get something that's above rate up front, it lets you hang out and fiddle between day and night and get extra cards. And then the extra cards that it's getting are always spells. So you end up in this spot where you're like, okay, I'll play this. It's a good blocker. I'll take a turn off. I'll flip it. I'll get a card. All right, now I have another card so I can double spell. All right, now I'm ahead again so I can take a turn off, flip this again, get another card. And you just like hang out and flood the board. Whereas if instead of that you played a 4 mana 2/3, now you're behind on board. So you can't really afford to take the next turn off. So your 4 mana 2/3 doesn't do anything, and you're kind of falling further behind because you spent mana on this thing that's not getting you anywhere. So the difference between Dawnguard and like a more expensive, smaller creature that's trying to give you similar outputs for similar input is really night and day. This card's fantastic. Borrowed Time. While I'm very down on auras that are removal spells because they often don't actually answer the thing that you put them on, Oblivion Ring style effects at least do answer the thing you removed from. They really are exiled. It has the disadvantages of being sorcery speed and potentially putting you in a spot where you get blown out if your opponent destroys this in combat, which I have done to people. But at least it is a hard removal spell. It has a good win rate. Note, while its win rate is comparable to Gavin Dawnguard, I personally am surprised by that. I've had much better experiences with Dawnguard and personally prioritize it much more highly than Borrowed Time. But also, like, it's hard for me to refute numbers here. I don't see any obvious numbers that would be like serious mitigating factors outside of the fact that Gavin Dawnguard does have an appreciably higher opening hand win rate, which I think is somewhat important, like more important than games drawn win rate, more or less directly. So I guess what I'm saying is the numbers agree that Dawnguard is better. I think that it's likely more better than the numbers suggest, but whatever. I think Borrowed Time is closer to Dualcraft Trainer, and I'm also not 100% sold that Borrowed Time is better than Dualcraft Trainer. Though Dualcraft Trainer has been a little bit more hit or miss for me than Dawnguard. I've certainly been absolutely crushed by Dualcraft Trainer, either because of its giving something Coven to like kill me very quickly, or even just its functioning as a 3/3 first striker on defense. It's definitely a very solid body, but it does have the disadvantages of being a 4 mana creature with 3 toughness, dying to most removal spells, and not giving you a lot of value up front, meaning that like it's a little bit in the trap of, you know, being more of a Baneslayer than a Muldrifter, being a card that potentially lets your opponent kill it and come out ahead. But it's not so expensive that it's disastrous if your opponent kills it, and it is very powerful if it lives. So I think it ends up being pretty good. It is very much in the scrum among lots of white 4 mana creatures that are powerful, which again is part of why I would like I'll basically always take a Gavin Dawnguard over a Dualcraft Trainer, just because I'm so much more likely to have too many 4s than too many 3s in white. But and I don't even know for sure if this is better or worse than the commons. Just to refresh the comparison, so its game in hand win rate is barely ahead of the top 4 mana common creatures, though it is ahead. I think it's 59.6 versus 59.9. No, okay. So Search Party Captain is ahead, but it's ahead of Silversmith. And then Search Party Captain's only sort of a 4-drop. Chaplain of Arms, another 1 mana 1/1. This one has a lower game in hand win rate than Lunar Veteran, while having a higher play rate relative to the stuff around it. I think that for most purposes, this is functionally interchangeable with Lunar Veteran, in that I'm mostly just looking for an object to sacrifice or discard for value. the difference between like the difference in the bodies doesn't really matter. I want this object. Um, I do think that like for the most part, a 1 mana 1/1 that gets you value without engaging in combat is better than a 1/1 first strike. Like the front side of Lunark is better than the front side of Chaplain of Arms. On the other hand, the back side of Chaplain of Arms is better than, well, it's just different. It costs more, but it gets you like a much more meaningful body relative to Lunark. Um, I don't think you often need to worry very much about like which one of these is better or worse. It's just like, are you the kind of deck that wants one or not? Sorry, Chaplain of Arms. Um, Loyal Griff. We're getting into like good but not impressive win rate territory. This is not a card I've personally played with. 3/3 flash flyer or 2/2 flash flyer 4/3 mana potentially lets you save another creature. Saving another creature is sweet. Getting value off of another creature, like retriggering an ETB to get value off of another creature, is nice. Requires some setup to make that happen, and I don't think you often want to just like hang out forever with the mana up. You're basically going to be like, this is the turn that I'm probably going to play this card. Let's see if I can, spike some value out of it or not. But it's, Windrake with appreciable upside, which puts it at fine. Don't think it's anything to write home about, but not sad to play it. Sunset Revelry. I think you want to be pretty careful about when you play this card. Like you really don't want to put this in like a green-white aggressive Coven deck. But it seems like it could be pretty great in some more defensive white decks, particularly white-blue or white-black. I don't have a lot of... I haven't played it, but it does enough different things that it seems like it should be fine if you are positioning yourself to play from behind. I think the only thing I have to add to the numbers here is basically like it's possible to believe that this plays better than its numbers suggest when you're supposed to play it, because I would expect that some people use it more than they should rather than like less than they should, or if they used it less than they should, it would like err toward having true numbers anyway. So yeah, I would guess that this might be actively good in the few decks that want it most. Audrey's Outrider. This one's interesting. This is a spot where I'm like a little bit surprised that its numbers are as bad as they are, because it has been good against me. I've only played against it a little bit. It suffers, obviously, from all of the same problems as Dualcraft Trainer. It needs to stick around, and it's a 4-drop, and there's an abundance of 4-drops, so it's in no way shocking that it's not great. The ability is like kind of sweet, but I guess I have to conclude from the numbers plus like the fact that you don't want Baneslayer type things, which this basically is, that it's the worst for. So certainly don't like prioritize this just because it's an uncommon or something. Beloved Beggar. This thing's pretty sweet if you are blue-white spirits and can discard it. It has really bad stats, which makes me think that people likely wildly overplay it. If you don't have a way to sacrifice it or discard it, it's really hard to get to the good part, which is the 4/4 flying vigilance creature, obviously. I don't think that you want to put this in like a green-white Coven deck and be like, oh, this is sweet because it gives me a 0-power creature, and then at some point later I get a 4/4 flyer, because someday never comes in that spot, I think. Bereaved Survivor. This is asking a lot of hoops, and the payoff's not very big, and like the body is really pathetic. I think this is better avoided. Ritual of Hope. I am totally shocked that this thing's win rate is as low as it is. It was amazing for me when I played it in like the perfect deck for it, which was green white go wide coven with multiple join the ranks or join the dance or whatever, the make two humans card. Certainly this is not good if you aren't like precisely a go wide coven deck of some sort. You do want at least a few cards that give you 2 creatures plus a high creature density. So I have to assume from this card's win rate that it's being overplayed, even though it's, you know, being played half as much as the good uncommons. So use caution, but the ceiling on this card is really high. Cathar's Call, everything about this says it's a trap. Removal's good. You put it on a thing, they kill the thing. Just avoid it. Rares. All right. Adeline, Resplendent Cathar, 66.5% game in hand win rate, among the best rares. This thing's obviously busted. White is good at having a lot of creatures in play. This is a 3 mana 4 toughness vigilance creature that likely has a bunch of power and gives you extra bodies, including the turn that you play it. It doesn't itself need to attack. Apparently I'm out of date, and it's even higher now. Yeah, up to 68% game in hand win rate. Don't pass this one. Vanquish the Horde, 63.5. This card is really awesome because wraths are good, and there are a lot of random little like tokens and stuff in this format that give it a considerable discount, so it doesn't end up costing a lot of mana. It's very common to be able to play it for like 2 mana, and when you can play your wrath for 2 mana, it lets you follow up by being the first player to deploy creatures afterward. With wraths, it is often the case that you can be aggressive enough that you don't want to play it. Likely still true in this format, but it's very, very easy to have decks where it's awesome. Again, probably quite a bit better when paired with blue or black than when paired with red or green, but those are the better colors anyway, so you're in luck. Sun Gold Sentry. It's a 3/2 for 2 with some words on it. The words are kind of nice, but mostly this is just an overstated body. Its game in hand win rate is in line with an overstated body, which is to say it's a little bit better than most of the best commons, but not super exceptional. Faithful Absence. This is a potentially constructed worthy removal spell, which might catch your attention in limited. While it has your attention, be sure to check out its game in hand win rate. Giving your opponent the ability to spend mana for a card is a lot more punishing in limited than it is in constructed. I mentioned that the fact that removal is very strong makes each removal spell a little bit worse, and the fact that removal is so strong in this format makes this format kind of a bit more grindy, which makes the drawback on this card that much more punishing. This is nothing special. Most likely you should avoid taking it enough that you won't end up with it. Its average taken at is 1.73. It gets passed very little, and those people are really getting punished for it. So this is the kind of thing where I shouldn't even comment on whether you should play it when you have it, because you should never expect to see it late enough that you might take it to be in a spot to make that decision. Sigarda's Splendor, slow and clunky. I drafted it once. I think I put it in my deck for a game and then realized it was going to be bad. Curse of Silence, it's just obviously not for limited. All right. Wait, nope. Let's check Mythics. All right. Intrepid Adversary. So this is in a similar position to that rare 2/3 for 2, where like just 3/1 lifelink for 2 is a solid limited body. Nothing exceptional. Roughly is like just a tiny bit better, I guess, than a 2/2 lifelink for 2, which is, you know, traditionally pretty good. The kicker ability on this matters a lot, though. If you draw this, I've certainly drawn this in the late game when I have like 6 mana and played it, and you know, basically just like get a kind of overrun type effect out of it and immediately killed my opponent. So it's like a good 2-drop that gets better late, and you basically always want to draw it. As you can tell from its game and hand win rate, it's not like as good as the actual best bombs or anything, but it's good enough that it is often going to be the card you want to take out of its pack, especially if you know that you're white. Enduring Angel. Okay. I haven't played with this. It was cast against me once. It seemed fine. It's a 5 mana, 3/3 flying, double strike. So it's in like the Baneslayer space, but with 3 toughness. It's like dies to bolt, like dies to Moonrager Slash and Silverbolt. Then it has, oh, maybe I haven't even played against this. I don't know. I think I've played against Sigardian Savior. I haven't played against Enduring Angel. Anyway, strong, but a little too Baneslayer to be totally dominant in the format. Like good, but not like top tier bomb. Sigardian Savior, little more value up front, little less value when it sticks around, which should be better positioned. So I'm going to guess that it's just like a little bit weaker in a vacuum. It's kind of similar win rate. They're both just like good 5 mana creatures that die to a decent amount of removal. This one gives you some value sometimes. I don't know. You're gonna like play these things if you're white, and like the details aren't gonna matter on a mythic. All right. Let me pause for a second here. Oh, that perfect.